X-Men 97 has been pretty well received, and this has led to speculation that a continuation of Spider-Man the animated series might be a possibility. Creator John Semper Jr. said he would be willing to come back if Marvel gave him full creative control. I wanted to know what stories Semper and the other Spider-Man writers would tell if given the chance. So I decided to ask them, and their answers led me down a rabbit hole I could have never predicted. The multiverse has allowed for infinite possibilities within the MCU, and with the Spider-Verse films and Spider-Man No Way Home, Marvel has proved that it's possible for numerous iterations of a beloved character to exist simultaneously. This idea gave me some hope, so I compiled a list of writers who worked on the original Spider-Man the animated series. I had two burning questions I wanted to ask each writer. Number one, I wanted to know if the writer would be willing to come back and write for a potential revival. And number two, I was curious if they had any specific Spider-Man stories they would adapt if given the chance. One thing I've realized when contacting writers, animators, directors, and their agents is that there are varying degrees of success. And I usually only hear back from a small percentage of the people I contact. But this time was different. Robert Skur responded just a little over an hour after I first reached out to him. He said he would be delighted to come back and write for Spider-Man 98 if it were to happen. He had a couple of stories he would like to tell, but said he'd really need to brush up on the original series to make sure he wasn't treading over new ground. But he said his favorite era of the comic books was roughly issues 85 to 150. So take from that what you will. Larry Brody thanked me for reaching out, but said he doubts anyone would ever ask him back, considering that he's close to 80 years old now and is years behind on the developments in Spidey's life. He said he's glad to hear there's a chance that the show may come back, but hopes it is with a group of younger and more talented co-creators who can give the audience the high quality it deserves. I think Larry is being modest, because not only did he write episodes featuring Tombstone and Hobgoblin, but he also created the Silver Surfer animated series. Ernie Altbacker said he would love to come back for a revival, but he also said Spider-Man 98 would probably have a whole new team. However, Ernie said that if he was asked to come back, he would love to adapt stories like The Punisher's origin and Kraven's Last Hunt. Can you imagine if they adapted Kraven's Last Hunt? Douglas Booth told me he loved working on Spider-Man the animated series, and he would be happy to jump back into the fray. He didn't have any specific stories in mind, but he said Peter Parker is a fun character to become and write for, and said Miles would be as well. And it's interesting he brought up Miles, because that reminded me of something else. Something that makes Spider-Man 98 even more of a possibility. Because Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was far from the first time the Spider-Verse has been portrayed on screen. This concept was first introduced in the 90s with Spider-Man the Animated Series. And because the Spider-Verse has been so well received in the movies focused on Miles Morales, I really do think it's possible for properties like Spider-Man the Animated Series, and maybe even Spectacular Spider-Man, to have revivals and exist at the same time as Marvel's other Spider-Man properties. This is why I was eager to hear back from the man responsible for the Spider-Verse concept. He was one of the only people who hadn't yet responded to me, so I did some research. And that's when I stumbled on something crazy. John Semper had already revived Spider-Man the Animated Series, sort of. Because back in 2014, Semper launched a website called cartoonspiderman.com. The purpose of this website? To share podcasts, artwork, and behind-the-scenes information about Spider-Man the Animated Series. But it also had another purpose. Semper announced he was reuniting the cast of the 90s Spider-Man show for a new series. This series had an Indiegogo campaign and its own website, and it would serve as a sort of spiritual successor to Semper's Spider-Man show. This project was called War of the Rocketmen. Inspired by an old movie serial from the 1930s, War of the Rocketmen was to feature a secret squadron protecting the skies of America from spies, saboteurs, and other agents of destruction during the height of World War II. This squadron would use futuristic jetpacks to battle the Axis powers who used similar technology. Semper released a trailer that had some cool artwork and made the series look promising. But as of the time I'm recording this, War of the Rocketmen seems to have stalled. The project was never fully funded on Indiegogo, and John Semper's cartoonspiderman.com doesn't seem to have been updated since 2014. The War of the Rocketmen's Facebook page had a status update in 2019, but still no word on if the series was ever finished. At this point, it's hard to say whether we're more likely to see War of the Rocketmen or Spider-Man 98. but John Semper certainly seems to be on board with the Spider-Man revival. I, for one, would love to see it, and I'm certainly intrigued by War of the Rocketmen. But what about you? Do you think Marvel should bring John Semper and the other writers back for Spider-Man 98? Could it exist alongside Marvel's other upcoming Spider-Man cartoon? Or is it better to leave Spider-Man the Animated Series in the past?